Hi, friends. I am Samantha Osei. I am a writer and I write fantasy, fiction, sci fi, and I also write some nonfiction. And we are here. I'm here with my friend and fellow writer, Melissa Peters. We're here reviewing and talking about this book that we read called The Curse of Penryth Hall by Jess Armstrong. Melissa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Melissa Peters. I have written a book called House on Highland Road. It's part of a series called Salvation Hills Haunting. It is a cozy horror YA novel.
Excellent. Well, like I said, we're here. We went ahead and decided to read something that came out in December of 2023 called The Curse of Penryth Hall. So this is the current cover of that by Jess Armstrong. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go through and look at a few different questions that we have, talk about it, and then for those of you who are on with us, and if you have any comments, please go ahead and comment on any of the questions that we ask, or if you are coming to this afterwards and checking it out. First, we are going to try and keep spoilers to the minimum so that way it doesn't give away anything, of course. But also, if you're here and you have anything that you want to add, please go ahead and comment and we will go ahead and reply to that as soon as we can. So, I've already gotten several different questions here. So one of the first things I wanted to ask was, and I feel it's really relevant to everybody, is well, here, first, let me give a summary of the book. I do have that here. Guess that might be important. So for those of you who haven't read the book that might be here just to get an idea of whether or not it's something you would like to read, this is the summary that I came up with. So we have our main character, Ruby Vaughn. She is an American heiress living in England and is requested to deliver a cache full of books to someone in a village called Lothal Green by her bookstore boss, Mr. Owens. Now, Ruby had spent some time there previously, and when her best friend and lover, or past lover, Tamsin, got married, Ruby felt betrayed and she ended up leaving. That comes up kind of throughout the story. It's right away, right in the front, so it's not really giving much away. It'd been years since she was in Lothal Green, and she decided to stop by to see Tamsin as she was delivering these books. While staying with the Chenoweths, which is Tamsin's new last name, Tamsin's husband, Sir Edward, dies a brutal death. Now, throughout the remainder of the book, Ruby is trying to find out if this so-called curse of Penryth Hall was the reason behind Sir Edward's death. Of course, through her inquiries of the village people, and she meets and discovers, all kinds of characters who could have done it. She joins forces with the local Peller, who happens to be a folk healer named Druin, to figure out the mystery. So that's kind of where we are at I would say, 10%, 15% of the book, and then it just follows through with that. So based on everything that you read and your personal
First, can I say how beautiful the cover is? That's
oh
what
yeah,
caught me.
yes, it's definitely beautiful. I love that for sure. And it's very interesting, like with the apples. It kind of made me think of Snow White.
Do you
With
know? Did you pick up on any apple theme? I didn't. I was just wondering why apples. Like, I don't remember apples being in the story.
Well, I have an idea, but
It's a
that
spoiler.
might be a spoiler,
Okay.
which may have just spoiled it. So,
We don't have
but
to get
yeah,
into it.
right. But did you like the book, Melissa?
when I got to the end, I would read the second book. So yes, I did enjoy it. Um, the first half, I was really invested. Second half, I struggled a little bit more. But by the epilogue, I had determined I would read a second book if it came out. So yes, I liked it.
Good. Yeah, I had similar thoughts about it. I thought it was a strong or a very solid first book for a new author. I liked her writing style. I learned a few words. Granted, my vocabulary is not the best, so I'm always excited to learn new words. And I really liked how her language and just in general how she wrote. I felt it was really interesting to me. Um, and I too would read a second book. Definitely. Do you have a favorite part? Anything that like really grabbed you that
I,
doesn't spoil anything?
yes, I have to stick to kind of to the beginning, but I have there's this the very parts words. They start when she met the Peller. So she's sunbathing. The Peller comes up. It's low tide, and he interrupts her when she's way too far out from where she should be.
Right.
I really enjoyed that little moment of connection and introduction. I guess the meet cute.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like the story he told her. I do wish that was tied in a little bit more. They reference it again, but it would have been really cool to get into that folklore of the area.
Yeah. I am. There's an instance. It's farther in, but I like Mr. Owens as a character. I don't know. He just seems like this little, maybe not crotchety, but someone that you wouldn't think would go around doing um, like adventurous, risky things. But if he had the chance, he would. And um, so there is a part in the book where he gets a chance to do something like that, and some of his personality comes out even more. And I thought that was a kind of a cute way of bringing him into the fold.
Yeah,
Um,
it was. Yeah, I like that part.
so
He kind of reminded me of the dad from the animated Beauty and the Beast.
yes, yes, I could see that.
I pictured him that way.
Yeah. I wasn't picturing him like overweight like that, but I was definitely kind of like shorter and kind of like with that same type of personality though. Like, okay, are we ready? Let's, and very protective too. Like I want to make sure that I'm protecting my Ruby. So 'cause Mr. Owens is Ruby's boss. And I correct me if I forgot, but she's living, is it above the bookstore or in the bookstore
I
or
think she
around
lives.
there?
I don't know if they have the bookstore in the house. I
But
don't
they're
remember.
living
But
together or there's some
mhm.
kind of living situation there. So it's almost like he is kind of a father figure
Mhm.
to her or a grandfather figure
It's
to her.
established pretty early on that she's lost her parents and he lost his children. So they've kind of like replaced their surrogates for each other.
Right. Exactly. So um, and one of the questions I have is who's your favorite character? That for me is Mr. Owens for sure. Just again, kind of what I was saying is he just has this little personality that kind of shines through, and it's fun, and adds a little different dimension to the book. So
Mhm.
um, I know you had told me earlier that there was none that stuck out quite so much to you, but have you thought about that a little more or
I like Fiachna the cat because I love cats, clearly.
right?
Um,
Clearly.
but I mean, I enjoy anytime an author makes a cat a character. I
Right.
also, um, if I was to pick a favorite character, I'd pick Mrs. Penrose. She kind of gives Butler vibes, where you're kind of like, the Butler's always done it. Did she do it?
Right.
Um, but she's nurturing and kind, and then you're like, is she a secret murderer? Um,
Right.
so,
I like that the way that she handles her anxiety is making pastries. I thought that was kind of a nice little, um, I guess, part of it, because we all deal with our anxieties differently, and a lot of times you find out kind of tropey things like people drink or people smoke or they eat or they go get a tub of ice cream or something, and those are all very likely vices when people are have a lot of anxiety. But to just go and cook and create, I don't know how many pastries she made, but it sounded like quite a bit.
Well, and you had asked earlier if I related to anyone, and at the time I didn't think so, but you've reminded me that Mrs. Penrose maybe I do relate to, because when there's been death in my family, then I apparently cook a ton. I'm still eating from last year, so
Right.
it's in my freezer for a year.
I work. I just dive into work generally and try and ignore everything else. So um, yeah, definitely. I do not relate to Miss Penrose in that way. Um, but I did like her character as well. I found her. Um, it almost reminded me of, and some people may be a little young for this, but the Brady Bunch and Alice, who is the maid of the Brady Bunch back in my younger days. So
Might be of the younger crowd, but I don't think so. But I didn't watch the Brady Bunch.
yeah, so yeah, some people who are younger than me know, and some people don't. So, um, but it kind of reminded me of something. Is that person who is technically like a maid, but is really more like a mother
Mm-hmm.
in that sense of trying to take care of people. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, would you read another book by this author that's not related to this book?
I mean, it depends. I read a ton of different styles of books and genres of books. It would have to depend on the book.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
I would definitely give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just based on the way that I like her writing style. So I would hope I could learn even more words in another book by her.
Liked the setting, like the whole gothic. I think we'll get into that, but um, the setting and the era. I love the 1920s. So
Yes, I did. I love that era too, and I was like, oh, maybe I could write a book like that. And I'm like, oh, it's a lot of research. Maybe I'll just read a lot of books like that
yeah,
for sure. Um, so by the ending, were all of your questions resolved that came up throughout, or did you felt like there was anything unanswered that you could share with everybody?
I don't think I can go into detail without spoilers, but the epilogue. I was happy by the epilogue. I was like, yeah, I'll read a second book. The ending of the book, I don't know if I was unsatisfied because there were things that were left unanswered because she might write a second book. I don't know if she is.
Hmm.
Um, so I was unsatisfied. There were some questions that I was like, just some small things. Like, I don't know if it's the last time she goes up to the big house, but when she goes up to the big house in her car and then she's wandering around the moor, nobody thinks to look for her car to find out where she was. I was confused by that. And then there was also a note sent at one point, and we never found out who sent it. So I'd like to know that. Maybe I missed it. I could have missed it in the book, but
Right. Well, Melissa brought that up earlier when we were off. We weren't live yet, and I was like, "What note?" So apparently, I completely missed that one. I do remember a time when I was reading that I fell asleep, but it wasn't because of the book. It was just because I was tired. So, and it was late, but I was like, that's probably the part that I fell asleep at. So, um, yeah, I felt that overall the questions were answered. Some of them, I definitely agree that what wasn't answered is probably going to be in another book. That it felt like it was being set up to become a series, which is kind of like the next question I wanted to ask is whether or not you thought this was going to move into a series, and definitely based on kind of the epilogue and a few unanswered questions throughout, then I would definitely say yes.
I think it might have to do with like a Scottish. I can't find the page, but something Scottish.
Something Scottish. Did I
Yeah,
get it wrong? She's in England though, right?
yeah.
Okay.
He's in
I was like,
England, but in the epilogue, they allude to a new adventure in Scotland. So
that's right. Okay. Well, I was reading some other people's reviews on this before I guess while I was preparing questions and everything, and someone said something about Scotland, and I was like, I don't think they were in Scotland. So, but I've been wrong before, so glad at least this time I wasn't. So, so we're expecting another book by her in this series. I would try it out, um, even though like Melissa mentioned the second half wasn't it wasn't quite as solid as the first half, but I think as a first, a debut book, I felt like it was a solid book. So we're going to kind of move into the plot and the structure a little bit, and then we'll go into some settings. And hopefully, for those of you who haven't read this, it won't. Again, we're going to keep the spoilers as small as possible, if not, just not having spoilers. And hopefully, it will help you though determine whether or not you want to read it, and put your money towards it. So, kind of my first question is, what are your thoughts on the book structure and flow of events? Like, did it all make sense to you? Did it flow well?
um, so I thought if it's a murder mystery, which I think it says it's a murder mystery, a mystery. It doesn't say a murder mystery. Um, I felt like the murder happened pretty far in. I think I finished that chapter where the murder happened, and I updated my Goodreads, and it said 12%. So to
Mm,
me, that's a little far in for a murder mystery. But if it's just a mystery, I'm not so sure. I read widely, and I do read murder mysteries, but I don't read specifically just murder mysteries.
right.
Um, yeah, I feel like the second half there was just so much going on. The reason it wasn't as solid as the first half, I feel like there was just too much going on.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like so much happened, and so it just didn't have that time to build up that gothic tension that I was hoping for.
Right. Yeah, I could understand that. Um, yeah, I thought that the structure overall, I could follow it. There were times where it was going back in time and then forward and then back, but I felt that it was done well enough that it wasn't jarring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at least I didn't feel like it jarred me into from and to. Um, and it was more of not actually moving into the past, but more of telling what happened in the past is how it came out to me. And so with that, it flowed a little better than if maybe it was a complete jump into in 1900 or whatever. So I thought it flowed pretty well. I just had like the angel come over my head. What was that? What was that? Okay. Um, anyway, so and I thought overall, I followed everything. I think the one aspect that was, I wasn't quite sure is that by the end, some of the characters that had been presented may have had better representation. I guess the best way to say it. Um, and their roles in like closer towards the end. Um, so yes, we're gonna say it that way. Does
Um,
that Is there any better way of saying that?
No, I think that was really good.
Okay.
This kind of leads into your next question, but and now I lost my thought. What was I gonna say? I got distracted. Well, maybe if you answer your second question, maybe it'll come back to me.
The whether or not it served the story well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it served the story overall well, but like some of the events I thought were maybe didn't need to happen. Let's put it that way. And that there were a few events where it was kind of like, there was some convenience of certain aspects and a certain relationship between Ruin and um, Ruby that is, it's kind of like, oh, was that something of convenience? Of Was that created in order to solve a problem that couldn't be solved any other way? So that was one thing that was kind of hard within that relationship with the characters. But now I'm probably recognizing that I sound very cryptic.
Well, we don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, to anyone that hasn't read this is very cryptic. Possibly to anyone that has read it too.
I think I know what scene you're talking about. And I don't know. I agree, it is convenient. I'm hoping that Ruan comes into the second book, if there is one, to solve that convenience, because it was a problem that didn't need to be created. Like it didn't. That problem could have been easily removed in edits.
Right.
So I think maybe it will serve a purpose in the second book.
Right. That's a
Fingers
good point.
crossed.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree.
I'm also hoping for the second book because I want to read about a Scottish Highland ruined or something.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
One thing that did happen pretty early on, so I'm going to go ahead and say what it is. So, at least for me and for those that have reviewed the book, most people had no idea what a peller was. And there was even that question brought up within the book, and it was never answered. And so in one review, someone's like, I actually Googled it, and I was thinking it was just a term that the author made up, but apparently a peller is a folk healer. So for those who haven't read it or have and are wondering, that's what a peller is a folk healer, or like an herbalist, or some sort of magical person. And in this case, I don't know if the official definition of peller is that it's the seventh son of a seventh son, but that's one of the definitions in the book. So I did find it strange that if a peller is something that is important to the book, and what a peller is important to the book, in that there's no definition of that, why? So that would be a question kind of moving forward. And is it because the peller himself doesn't know if he is a peller or not? Right. So that's,
You have to say a peller is a folk healer. Like I thought it was just a made up term too.
yeah.
And I also thought of my question, what I was going to say before, again, and then I forgot it again. So obviously it's not that important, but it was possible.
Right. Well, if you
I'll write it down.
Right. Or raise your hand so I know not to talk anymore and let you talk.
It's way too
right.
All over the place today.
Right. Did anything surprise you in this?
That's what I was going to say. Thank you. So I love reading mysteries and I love solving the problem. I think a lot of readers do that. They're excited when they can see ahead and they're like, yep, I know who did it. And then they're right. And then there's times where you don't get it right, and you are ecstatic because you're like, yes, I predicted who the killer
Right.
was, or
Right.
whatever. Um, and this book, I didn't solve it,
Hmm.
but I also wasn't ecstatic when I found it out. I just felt like it was because the question was, did the book structure and flow of events serve the plot well? Um, and so I think maybe that could have been developed a little bit further. Maybe I just missed the bit of foreshadowing that was put in there.
Right.
Um, but I wasn't ecstatic when I was surprised. So,
Right. Right. I think my surprises, yeah, I wouldn't say that I was surprised really,
mhm.
but it wasn't expected. How's that? It
An
was like,
unexpected,
oh, okay,
an unexpected surprise. Isn't that an oxymoron? That doesn't work.
probably.
That
Yeah.
doesn't.
Because if you're, no, an expected surprise would be an oxymoron.
Okay, yeah.
um,
So an unexpected surprise is just redundant.
right. Right. We'll, cross one of those off in our writing. So, and the, one of the areas, and this kind of goes into character, but it goes along with events and whatnot of um, and twists. Like usually, to me, there's plot twists that help develop the characters. Um, it shows, oh, how do they react to something that is different or unexpected, and everything that Ruby went through did not seem to develop her character too much.
Mhm.
I did see a little bit of change in the end, and her reaction a little bit, but it felt very kind of, even keel all the way through. Um, but that might also be part of the plan if there's a second book, right? It's kind of like book one is developing kind of her baseline of character. And then two is where it's like jumps into, oh, okay, this is what I've learned from that whole experience. Um, that I'm kind of hoping for that.
I guess we're set on a book too.
Right.
I agree with you. Like there wasn't. I don't think anyone showed much character growth.
Hmm.
Uh, but there were moments. I know we were talking about this earlier, and as I've been thinking about it, it occurred to me that there were moments that she did grow. So um, I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't go into all of them. But there is an
Hmm.
attack on her at one point, and she's able to recognize herself in the foolishness of the instigator,
Mm.
um, and
Hmm.
she kind of decides to let it go. Um, and then by the end of the book, she's let go of some other things that have been holding her back, but not blatantly. Like it's not super obvious. It hasn't made a huge impact in her life yet. So
Right.
maybe that will be built on in if there's a book two.
Right. Because I mean, this could be a 7 book series. We don't know what that expect or what the author's planning. So, um, with this, with the knowledge, or I should say, the expectation of having a second book, most series don't end after 2 books these days, anyway. So, so you just don't know. Like, maybe
It,
it's going to be 26 books later, and that's why Ruby's development has to go a little bit slower than others. So,
yeah, it is traditionally published, so I don't know how that works because I'm a self-published author. Um, I don't know if they base your second book off of how your first book does. I would assume so.
right.
So maybe we might not get a second book, but I'm hoping that we do.
Hmm. And well, and sometimes traditional publishing, from my understanding, is that they'll purchase the ideas of the whole series.
That's
So
true. Yeah, I've
someone
heard that.
has the whole series in mind. So that could be, which would make, I mean, to me, that would make sense based on how the epilogue is.
Mhm.
right? Because that kind of sets us up for that expectation. But again, traditional publishers have a different outlook on things, and depending on how this one does will may very well depend on whether or not we see a second one.
It is a debut novel, and I don't know that debut authors often get that, but I could very well be wrong.
Right.
It also received the first crime novel award winner, so that's a good sign for her, for
Yeah.
Jess Armstrong.
Yeah. And it says on top, it says a USA Today bestseller. So
Oh, mine doesn't.
she's got some good marketing.
She must have got that after I bought this copy.
Oh, nice.
Mine doesn't have that on top.
Oh, yeah, mine's right on top. Well, it's a lot easier to update the ebook. For sure.
Imagine sending a new copy to everyone who's bought your book every time.
Right. You're like, oh. No, this is one of the positives of having the ebook, right? Is it's much easier to update.
Yeah.
Let's go. We talked a little bit about setting before, kind of in this, England and the 1920s. How did that setting, do you think, support the story? Or did it?
I think it supported, but it also detracted a little bit because I was so excited for. First, it opens up in this what I imagine to be this nice, big kind of mansion with a swimming pool and a 1920s theme where she parties every night.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes to I assume the Welsh moors, and she's on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, and then she's in the ocean, and I was so excited for a wonderful Moorish Gothic novel.
Right.
And the house was kind of Gothic, but it didn't play. I mean, it played a bit of a role in it in the end,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't feel like it had much to do with the setting in the central part of the book, except for maybe the rain.
Right.
I feel like setting was kind of the Gothic setting was kind of lost
Mm-hmm.
for a while, and then it was brought back in. So
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely say that most of the setting to me was mud
yeah,
and
and
rain and the village. Like it was, there was a lot of what felt like walking around in the mud.
mm-hmm,
And um, it, so the setting wasn't, when we're talking about this hall and this mansion, and we're talking about, kind of an old village and, whatnot. It, yeah, I didn't really gather a lot from those aspects of setting, but I got a lot of mud.
yeah. And at one point, Benedict, one of the farmers, his name's Benedict. He has a truck, and I'm like, how did this guy get a truck? Aren't we like in medieval times? Because the village, it just sounds so medieval.
Yes,
It's
because everyone's like carrying everything with a basket, and everyone's, like they're farming. It's
they're
very
walk everywhere. So I was so
like,
surprised when there was a
yeah,
truck. I'm like, oh, right, we're in the 20s.
right.
And I mean, that's probably how rural villages were back then. There weren't all probably
Hmm.
too many automobiles because the roads weren't great, but um, maybe dropping in some electric lighting or something to ground us in the 1920s, maybe.
Right.
Maybe jazz comes on the radio or something. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I kind of lost the whole 1920s out of the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but not for anything other than like my focus was more on, what was happening. And a lot of what was happening didn't involve the setting unless it was outside in the rain and muddy. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or, getting to and from Penryth Hall. And like, so that was a very interesting aspect that I was like, oh, until you look at it, until I looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, there's this mansion and everything, but wait a minute, how is that actually being utilized in the story, because even where the death occurred was not in the hall, right? It
Mhm.
was outside of it. So, um,
It does play a bit of a role in how the killer was planning to execute their plan. Um, but that could have happened without the house as well.
right. Yeah, definitely. Um, did
Oh, I
this,
just thought of how we could have could have foreshadowed. I can't go into it because spoilers, but well, I guess I could. We could have foreshadowed the killer just slightly because at the
Mhm.
very beginning, it's not a spoiler because it happens right at the beginning. But Ruby's asleep in bed and she has a nightmare, and when she wakes up, she has some bruises. Um, and her cat is hissing at something, and that cat could have left a mark potentially on the bad person, the killer.
Right,
Try to be super cryptic, and it's not working.
right, right. It's kind of worked.
Nobody understands a thing.
I think we've been pretty cryptic the whole time, so I think we're pretty good.
I hate when people spoil things for me. Um,
Yeah.
the only book it worked in was Me Before You by Jojo Moyes or whatever her name
Mhm.
is. I had a friend tell me how it ended, and the entire book, I'm like, she's wrong. She's got to be wrong. I don't care that she's read the book. That wasn't a spoiler. And then of course
It
it ended
was,
that way, and I could not stop crying. So
yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, we're doing our best. I think so far we're doing pretty good. I think we're doing well. Um, did the setting seem real to you? Like, could you imagine or feel the setting as it was described?
in parts,
Hmm.
like the cliff scene, I keep going back to that. I think that was definitely my favorite part of the book.
Hmm.
I really wanted to be there. Um, and then occasionally, like she had some conversations with Tamsin outside, and the meadow felt real.
Hmm.
Um, Ruan's cottage felt real to me to a
Right.
degree. His one room felt real,
Hmm.
but overall, I mean, the rain and mud kind of felt real. Like
Yeah.
nobody wants to be out in the rain and mud trudging around.
Right. Right. Yeah. That as I've indicated before is what I took away from the setting. So it definitely, probably because it was raining the most of the time I was reading this book, and it was just so much like so similar to what I was going through outside of the, like, actually trudging through the mud. But
I
yeah, so I think that's why it felt pretty real to me.
I do think the author did really well at like I liked her style of writing. She really drew me in. When I
Yeah.
was reading and I was invested in the story, I was living it. Like I was feeling
Hmm.
it. I might not have understood everything, but I
Hmm.
was immersed in it. So she did a good job at weaving description into the narrative, I think.
Right. And yeah, and I would agree with that for sure. I could visualize fairly easily what was going on.
Hmm.
So and that's something I'm very good at. So some people aren't good at visualization, so it may be a little bit more difficult for others. But yeah, I definitely could be there and visualize the story as I was reading. So it was nice. Um, would you want to read more books set in this world?
I think we've established that yes, I would.
Yes, and let's have a little bit more of the Gothic theme, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's the first book. I know I've only published one book, but my first book was definitely harder to establish everything in than the
Hmm.
books since. Not that I'm a pro yet, but I'm working at it.
Right.
I think she'll probably become more practiced at it as she goes, and getting feedback does help. You learn from the reviews you get. So as
Mhm.
long as we're constructive and provide her ways we would like to see a book improve, potentially she'll take our feedback. Well, not ours maybe, but readers' feedback and
Right.
incorporate that into her next book.
definitely. Yeah, I'm excited to see kind of how she grows as an author, and definitely has some really good strengths in her writing, like I said. So um, I would definitely pick up another book, whether it's the second to this or a different one, just to see you know how she continues to become a better author. So
Um, when I picked up the book, I started reading it in a British accent. Turns out that the main character is American heiress, but I was still reading it in a British accent. So
which is funny because I didn't even think about trying to read it in a British accent. I just read it in my own American accent, and
well, you
that's
were
funny.
you were more right than I was. So.
Well, yeah, I was like, huh. Yeah, when you told me that before, I thought that was pretty funny. But I think those are all the questions that I've come up with. Was there anything else that you wanted to chat about, or anything else that you thought of during our discussion?
No, I think this was really good. I had after I finished, I wrote down my answers, and since then I've reflected on the book and we talked a bit, and I feel like I came up with more answers than I had originally. So
Hmm. Yeah, and I really like doing like having a conversation about it and really kind of focusing on those parts that we liked and we thought were um, the strengths of the book. So for anyone who is on and watching this, you know this of course is our opinion, and not everyone will have the same opinion. And if you have some comments on what we said, go ahead and comment below and we'll answer. But Melissa, you have the book that we're going to be doing next month.
see if I can
So
put it
if
in the chat.
anyone wants to join us, it's called Wrath Becomes Her. Um,
Polydorus.
Eden Pelopors. So, and it's in 1940 Lithuania,
Yeah.
and it is about a golem that I guess the a father loses his daughter
It's
to
Holocaust.
Nazis, to the
Yeah.
Nazi party, and then creates a golem named Vera, who then is, sent to for revenge. So we're gonna see what that's all about next
It
month.
sounds like she begins to feel the same emotions that Vera felt and realizes that it's not her life to live, but she's
Mm-hmm.
got to make a decision. So
Right, exactly. So very interesting kind of concept of with golems, and so I thought that was interesting. So we will be here doing our book talk on the last Tuesday of February. So, and that will be posted on, Melissa will be hosting that. So it'll be posted on her channel. And all the Tuesdays between now and then, we will be back to our co hosted sprints. And we'll, if there's anything that you want to see with us, just let us know. If you have any suggestions on books to read, feel free to let us know as well. So,
and we alternate between channels. So next week we will be sprinting on my channel, and the week after on Samantha's.
yeah, definitely. I thank you all for coming. Thank you for watching. Again, comment, subscribe. That'll help us grow our channels. And we appreciate you. And we hope you have a wonderful and a amazing day and evening. So have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.